This is just going to be a short video talking about the first paper that you have to write for the class. The paper is due on March 5th, so you still have a little bit of time, but you should start thinking about it now. There's not going to be a ton of frills for this video, basically just working through what's on the syllabus and the rubric that I put online that you can look at. For this paper, you are writing a 3-paged essay. This is a double-spaced essay, normal font, 1-inch margins. Don't have a long header. I don't need to know your name. I don't need to know the date. I definitely don't need to know my name. I don't need to know the name of the class because you're submitting it on Blackboard. All I want you to have is the title of your essay. And you don't even really need to have a title if you want to just get right into it, but a title never hurts. So what you are doing in this essay, you are going to explain how you would define sport. You can't really be wrong here. You're coming up with the definition of what you think sport is. If you want to go to a dictionary to have that as their basis, great. But don't only rely on the dictionary. Just because it's a dictionary doesn't mean it's right. We're trying to use a sociological understanding of what we mean by sport, not a linguistic understanding. Linguistic is fine, but you want to do something. Say something bigger. Explain why you're coming up with the definition. So you could draw on a dictionary. You could draw on your own experiences. You could just sit down and think it through, which I hope you do. You could think about the readings that we've had that are talking about what sport is in society and what it does. So lots of places to start, but come up with your own definition. Then you want to give examples of what fits your definition and what does not and why not. That's how you really build an explanation of what the definition does, right? Tell me if cheerleading counts as a sport. Tell me if basketball counts as a sport. Tell me if rock climbing counts as a sport. Make sure you provide examples to support your case, right? That's the showing the ones that fit your definition. And then as you're doing that, you should probably go into depth on one or two to really show this is why they work. The other thing I want you to do is make sure to consider whether some of those kind of more alternative sport-like things that we've talked about so far would count as a sport under your definition. So we're working through video games in the first part of the class. So does esport count as a sport? We're looking at pole dancing in the first part of class. Does pole dancing count as a sport? We're looking at pigeon racing in the first part of class. Does pigeon racing count as a sport? Does cockfighting count as a sport? Right? Why or why not? Can't be wrong, but it has to be consistent with the way you are with your definition. And then I want you to also reflect on what your definition teaches us about the role of sport in society. I can tell from previous years that I've used this assignment, people often do a good job on the first part, and then sometimes they completely forget about that final question. That's the real sociological thing, right? You came up with a definition. Well, what does that show us? And that's where you can use discussions and readings from class. That's the separation of an A paper versus you can do an amazing job on the first part. If you don't do that last question at all, that's still going to be a B paper, right? Because you didn't do the most exciting part. When I'm grading, this is the stuff I'm looking for. And this rubric is on Blackboard. You can see in terms of the definition, do you do all these things? Do you have these case studies? And then overall, this is where that discussion of the larger social lessons come in, along with writing, and is it just an interesting essay? So that's the first paper that's due for class. Try to have fun with it. Try to reflect on what you really think, because again, you have a lot of freedom here. It's really more of a kind of a mix of a philosophy paper and a sociology paper in this way, because you're starting out with you create the definition, and then you are using some evidence or data from the world, but it's somewhere between philosophy and sociology.